Now, to push some of these ideas along and to deal with some of these ambiguities, there's a number of proposals out there that we put forward. And this is, I want to spend a little time in detail on some of these. First is the area of encouraging understanding of intangibles. Second is encouraging financial investment. And finally, the actual utilization of intangibles by companies. As I said, the slides will be available, so there's a lot of information here, but let me go through it real quickly about some of the things that are important here. The accountants still haven't figured out a disclosure system for intangibles. If you buy an intangible, that long list I showed you before, if you buy an intangible from outside the company, you have to account for it. If you make the same intangible inside the company, it's completely invisible. It doesn't have to show up on your balance sheet whatsoever. That makes no sense. But the accountants don't know how to deal with that. Safe harbor for financial statements and reporting intangibles. Not only have you got problems in disclosing your intangibles, under GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, you may in fact be precluded from talking about the value of intangibles because it doesn't fit under the standard accounting system. You don't want to have people talking about things that don't fit in the system. How do you solve that? You create what's called a safe harbor provision that allows companies to actually talk about their intangibles, the value of their intangibles, in their financial disclosure. Every time you bring this up, the accountants immediately say, Enron accounting. You're cooking the books. You're allowing companies to make up numbers. Well, we just went to a system in the United States and in Europe where bankers are now allowed to make up numbers for whatever they have in their toxic assets. It's called mark-to-model instead of mark-to-market accounting for banks. So I'm not quite sure why we can let the banks cook their books and the industrial companies can't. In the United States, we're going to probably have another debate over what's called Sarbanes-Oxley, which is the accounting standards and the requirements for disclosure. The courts are looking at whether parts of Sarbanes-Oxley are in fact unconstitutional. If they rule that parts of Sarbanes-Oxley are unconstitutional, that whole issue of disclosure will be opened up again. Danger, opportunity. We have a number of ways of encouraging people to think about intangibles, one of which in the United States is called the Baldrige Award. The Baldrige Award was started in the 1980s to deal with quality. It originally was a quality award similar to the Deming Award in Japan. If you actually go back and look at the criteria that the Baldrige Award now uses, take out the word quality every time it gets used in the title, because it's still the Baldrige Quality Award, they actually use the word innovation more than they use the word quality. It has turned into an innovation award. The trouble is nobody knows it. It's still called the Quality Award. So simple things like changing the Baldrige Award to deal explicitly with intangibles and with innovation. As I said, federal government has a lot of investments in intangible assets. They do analysis on how much they spend for R&D across the federal government. They do analysis of how they spend for education in the federal government. Easy next step, make it into a cross-cutting budget exercise for intangibles across the federal government. Again, once you measure it, it gets managed. If you can't identify it, it is literally not there. And that's the problem with politicians and with corporate executives. If I can't measure it, I can't manage it. If I don't have to manage it, I don't want to pay attention to it. So bringing simply up the awareness that these things exist and have real value, have numbers attached to them, is very important. Finally, there's a lot of ways that one could, in fact, look at promoting financing this. I won't go through all of these things, including going back to Basel II, which hasn't got a clue about intangibles. Maybe it includes intangibles. Maybe it doesn't include intangibles. It's up to the banks. It's not up to the bank. It's up to the national regulator. No, it's not up to the national regulator. Some explicit recognition when we go back and redo the Basel Accords, which apparently we're going to have to do, that intangible assets have value. Bunch of other things. A knowledge tax credit. Most countries in the industrial world have an R&D tax credit. You can get a tax credit for your research. You can't get a tax credit for training your people, however. So what's the difference between me investing in the actual work of a scientist or engineer and investing in the education of that scientist, engineer? They should be linked at the hip, but they aren't. I can get a tax break for one, I can't get a tax break for the other. As unemployment rises, we're sending people to unemployment rolls, at least in the United States. Why not send them to schooling instead and give the companies a tax break for actually taking their unemployed workers and sending them back to school? Finally, there's a whole set of other areas, such as looking at small business loans. You go through the regulations for the Small Business Administration in the United States. Maybe you can use intangibles, maybe you can't. In some cases it's been allowed, in some cases it's been specifically disallowed. Again, it's this lack of understanding of the broader picture that these things actually have value. One loan officer may say it's okay, another loan officer says, I can't touch that, that's Enron accounting. We've done a couple of studies. They're online at our website on this. I would refer you to those. We will make our presentation available online as well, and I believe at the end of the session we'll have time for comments and questions. So thank you again. I've given you a really quick and dirty overview of what's happening in the United States. I'm honored to be here at the opening of this institute. You're doing very important work, and I hope we can learn from your work. Thank you.